Welcome to United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America on WSGW. Now, here is your host, Kareem Bowen.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. I am in the studio today, and I have with me my producer, John B. in the place to be. John, what is good with you?
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello, hello. And we also have with us, we're going to get right into the thing. We're not going to hold up anything. Let's get Mark Bassett all the way from the sunny shores of California into the stream. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing great. I'm going to do a new greeting. Aloha. I'm going to go back to my Hawaiian roots. Aloha today.
Yeah, we're excited about your new greeting. Aloha.
I like it.
Yeah, it is hello, hello, and aloha. All right.
Yeah.
So, Mark, what's going on? Give us some updates on what's happening in the world around you, where you are right now. Is California still attached to the continental U.S.?
It is. It has not fallen off. It hasn't burned up. We're still here. The weather's been a little weird in that it's been a really heavy marine layer for a good chunk of the day. And what that means is, like, I'm sitting in a cloud part of the day. Then it burns off and I can go down to the beach. So.
Okay. I just had that image of you like the little kid. Is it Charmin that has the kid that's sitting in the cloud? The toilet paper.
I think it is. Yeah.
What is that?
They've got the Bears. I don't know.
Okay, so who's Charmin? So maybe it's Cottonelle.
Okay.
Cottonelle, but I just had that image like evoked in my mind when you said that, of you sitting in the cloud with your little arrow, playing Cupid. But anyways, so Mark, so you're talking about a marine layer. My question is, are there still wildfires going on? I never know when California's on fire and when it's not.
That's my knowledge. No, I don't think so. No.
So everything's put out.
Everything's put out. There are a lot of people from Pacific Palisades, which is where the big fires were, that are moved temporarily down to this region. We've got actually a couple in our condo complex that are renting a condo for about a year because they've been displaced. But no, all the fires are out.
What do you mean you never know if California's on fire? It's wall-to-wall coverage on the news whenever California's on fire.
But that's only when there's massive fires, because sometimes there are fires in California, and it's just kind of like people just expect there to be wildfires, and it's not necessarily a big news story. And I was kind of surprised because I had people that were out there like, yeah, there's wildfires out in California right now. I'm like, I didn't hear anything about it.
Those are probably out in the unpopulated areas. I mean, if you've ever been to California, you know how dry it is and how easy it would be for a wildfire to occur. So,
hey, Tony says it never rains in Southern California.
What's that?
I'm laughing because I gave you the lyrics to an R&B song by Tony. It's an R&B group, and they sing a song, "It Never Rains in Southern California."
Oh, that's way older than that. That's a remake then.
It's a remake, but it's a popular song that they sang, and you guys are kind of looking at me like, Jonathan's like, nope, never heard that one.
I know I'm a music person, but I'm not a Tony person. So.
Oh, okay. Well, hey, I want to know. So what's going on? Are you guys a part of? Where are you guys at with this whole? We got a tariff. We don't have a tariff. We got a tariff for 25 days. We got a tariff pause. Where are we at with this? All this, Mark? Have you just tuned out of this, Mark, altogether, or what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, yes. I mean, again, there's nothing I can do about it. I just have to kind of hang tight. I mean, I think ultimately the worst thing to do would be to panic. I mean, history shows that the stock market rebounds and goes up. And so, frankly, if you have extra cash, now is probably a good time to buy in on safe companies or just funds, mutual funds, etc. To me, it's just a symptom of what's wrong with this president, which is you can't, when you're running when you're running a country, never mind a large company or a company, never mind a country, you can't whipsaw decisions because it destabilizes things and creates chaos and panic. And like I've said a number of times, like while I don't fundamentally disagree with some of the higher level principles, like I do think we needed to do something about China. China doesn't compete fairly. There's a lot of unfair trade practices. We can't let that continue. How he's going about doing it, I think, is just unprofessional, and just speaks to kind of his lack of discipline and thoughtfulness.
Do you think there's a way to do it in 4 years without taking drastic action like that?
I think you have to set out a strategy and a plan. I don't ultimately, like, execution matters. What makes something successful is how you execute it, how well thought out it is, and how well you execute it. And I don't think much of this is well thought out or well executed. A lot of the Doge stuff is not well. Again, I don't have an issue. I think we've got a bloated government. We've got to take costs out. But how to go about doing it is not well thought out, and certainly it hasn't been implemented well. When you fire people, rehire people, and then fire them again, it's just, preposterous.
What does that do for morale as a part of the question for those that you may need to keep around? Yeah. So I think, when I think about the tariffs, I'm just like, okay, I try not to even pay attention to that anymore because, as you said, Mark, we really can't do anything about it anyways at this point. And it's going to be what it be. Que sera, sera.
That's why I don't, people getting all upset about some of this stuff. I understand why they're getting upset. I look at my retirement savings, and on paper they're down 10% from the beginning of the year. That being said, there's nothing I can do about it until the next time there's an election. So I'm just, that's why I've disengaged largely from all the looking at news online, reading things online, because I know how I'm going to vote, and the next time I can vote, I will. I've never voted in a midterm. I might vote in a midterm this time.
Why haven't you ever voted in a midterm?
I don't know. Again, I've always said I'm just not that political a person, to be honest with you. And so I've only really voted when there's a presidential election.
Okay. Jonathan, you were kind of alluding to something that I kind of want to reverse this a little bit, backtrack, and bring it up because you mentioned how do you make these changes? And I think you're alluding to the fact within a 4-year term is kind of what it was.
Yeah.
So you think that the topsy-turvy whiplash decision-making on tariffs is necessary in order to accomplish what he wants to within his 4-year window?
I think it's one of the quickest routes, and I think that's what he wants is a quick route to big successes. My opinion on the whole thing is going to be shaped by, okay, he has brought a lot of these other countries to the negotiating table. And
is what we're being told.
And Europe has put out big statements about, okay, we're willing to do this. We're willing to do this. And other countries have also put out statements saying, well, we've always been happy to negotiate. No, they haven't. They've been exploiting American trade for decades, and now they're at the negotiating table. Is he going to take the win, or is he going to rub it in their face and say, no, we're going to...
What is your thought?
Me? What do I think is going to happen?
Yeah.
Well, he's already said Europe was like, we're ready to do 0 for 0 tariffs. That was their step. They were like, let's just get rid of the tariffs that we've been screwing you on for years. We'll call it even. And
I wish you could see your facial expressions while you're having this conversation.
Exactly what my face is doing. I'm aware. But I'm sitting here thinking, great, that's a win. But Trump has said, no, we need more. And I go, ooh, no.
Well, I mean,
take the win.
When I listen to the conversations, and I literally have tuned out for most of this conversation because I think, Mark, as you said earlier, that this is a situation that you got to ride the wave, right? You're gonna, unless we just completely run off a cliff altogether, you ride the wave. And so that has just been interesting. But I think that how you do what you do matters. And I think that's what you were alluding to, Mark. And I was, listening to the leader of China today, having this conversation, and he's just like, listen, there are ways for us to do this that make much more sense. And we can do this in a way that has, how can we say this? It's not so antagonistic. And I think that this is what people are saying across the board. And I just sitting here just like, this is crazy. And I was listening to President Trump come on, and he's like, well, China has a lot of pride. And so, they have a lot of pride. That's why they haven't made it. And I'm sitting here like going, isn't this whole thing and how you're operating based under pride? I think that's kind of the foundational thing. So however that happens, I always say that my God is still on the throne. So I put my trust in him, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican in the office. But it's just a little different. And I think that in a time when a president is supposed to bring some stability feeling to people, and to make them feel, well, I guess you got to say, you got to choke on the medicine before you get there. So I guess that's what the philosophy is. I don't like it.
He
But
said that in an interview.
yeah, no, and I think it's funny because most people that he voted for or that voted for him were not kind of thinking that this was the route that we were going to be going on. And so now to tell them, hey, it's not about eggs, it's not about bread, it's not about the cost of milk, it's about something completely different is problematic for me. But I didn't vote for him, so I guess it doesn't matter. So we're going to see what happens with this continual saga. We look at the value of the greenback and how it has lost great value. There are a lot of things that are going on that I think that are even outside of just this tariff situation, but things that as we look at the value of the dollar and what that does and how we're able to position that to really just kind of establish something that's more meaningful for all of America. So I have an all of America approach on a lot of things. I'm kind of on the left side, on the right side, in the middle. And I think that overall, I'm probably just kind of right in the center of where we need to be in terms of politics in my particular thought. But I want to talk to you today about some other things that the number 45 has been, number 47, excuse me, number 45 was his last number I gave him. What number 47 has been up to. And it's just really this concept or this idea of these executive orders. Do you know how many orders we're at right now, Jonathan?
No, I saw one just while I was doing some
looking
around. There was an executive order about water pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like shower heads.
What was it called? I saw that, and they were saying this was the executive order
or make I don't know, make
to restore great showers or something like that.
Yeah.
So, but what's funny about that is, and this is completely, I watch this movie with this. She is a detective. The Residence? Have you seen The Residence on Netflix?
No.
Mark, have you seen The Residence?
No,
all right. I'm going to recommend you guys. If you guys like
Okay.
Perry Mason, Angela. What's the lady's name? Angela that does the investigation. What's
Murder,
that?
She Wrote. Murder, She
Yes.
Wrote. Angela Lansbury.
Yeah. So if you guys like those kind of movies, you got to watch The Residence on Netflix. And what was so funny when I saw that executive order on restoring peaceful showers or whatever it was called, there was in the movie, a portion of the movie, the person who plays the president in the show is having this like meltdown because he can't get his shower pressure right in the shower. And so the entire White House staff is going crazy because it feels like an old man's peeing on me. It's too, and he's going through all of these different things. And there's this one engineer who finally works it out, and they didn't think that they were ever going to be able to do it, but he got the water pressure right. It was hot, and it was like he's scalding his skin, and so it was interesting that a couple of days after watching that, I see our president actually write an executive order on restoring.
Think about that for a minute. That you're president of the United States, and that takes time. It takes money. People have to write these up. That he's worried about the water pressure. That frankly, it could be undone, in 3 years or 4 years. I mean, and that's to me what the issue is here. Of like, and we've talked about it before. Ruling by executive orders. I mean, where we're at. So he's not the only one that's done it. But we're literally worried
about water
pressure.
Yeah.
And do I find low water pressure annoying? I do. But for God's sakes, I'd like to think I wouldn't be worried about that if I was the president of the United States.
Well, I'm going to say this. I don't agree with him very much in many places, but when it comes to your shower, Mark, I think that this is, hey, me and number 47 are on the same page with this. My shower sets the standard and the tone for the rest of my day.
I like
And if,
I like high water pressure in my shower too, man. I do.
Mark, if
I
we have
like to
people out
keep
there
me kind of
taking
focused on that. So
if we have these people taking showers out there, soggy, like barely getting wet showers and not being able to feel the presence of the pressure and the heat in a shower, this is one of the reasons why we have crises in the world, is because no one gets a good
No
shower.
one gets a good American shower.
You
in
need a
anymore.
good
yeah.
American shower. I need one to get my day going. So, hey, number 47, we are so proud. I hope it is restored. When showers are restored and we're having good American showers, then all of America will prosper. And I think I'm standing with them. That's my opinion. That's my thought, and I'm sticking with it. Uh, but I want to talk about some of these other issues that are out there, and some of the other things that we're talking about. And in terms of referencing the show, Conversations of Race in America, I do want to have a conversation, even though we've talked about some of these things as they relate to individual issues. I want to kind of take it from the approach of looking at these things holistically, um, from the impact, the impact that they would have on communities of color. And I want to talk about two particular executive orders that I want us to take a look in. The first one, and I'm still trying to figure out like the reasoning and the purpose, and I'm trying to come up with something different. But there's sometimes you just got to say it is what it is. But Executive Order 14253, who comes up with these numbers? And is there like a tracking? Is this like a running tally of
I would
all?
assume it's a running tally. I would assume.
Really? So this is the 14,253rd executive order that we've had since they've been doing executive orders.
Could be.
That's
I don't
someone
know.
let us know if you're out there. You get this. Put this in a message. I'm curious now. But anyways, executive order 14253. It is the executive order that is responsible or is slated for the purpose of restoring truth and sanity to the American history. Okay, so let me just share with you all what this is, and because I'm sure none of you guys have these memorized, and even though I sent this to you, you probably didn't have 9 years to look at this, as I haven't either. But these are things that are conversational, and I think that they're important to talk about. So this executive order directs members of the presidential cabinet to work with Congress to defund Smithsonian Museum budgets, exhibits, and programs that divide Americans based on race or acknowledge transgender identity. The order specifically cites the National Museum of African American History and Culture, which is NMAAHS, a whole long word. You could just said the words instead of doing the acronym. But anyways, the Smithsonian American Art Museum and the Smithsonian American Women's History Museum, another long set of letters, which does not currently have a physical structure, as perpetuating divisive, race-centered ideology and narratives that portray American and Western values as inherently harmful and oppressive. I'm going to continue. The order also directs the Secretary of the Interior to reinstate and restore. Let's stop at the first part before we
Yeah,
get to this one.
yeah, because you're going to hit multiple issues here. So.
Yeah, and so I want to just okay. So based upon what we're talking about, this order to restore truth and sanity to the American history, the title itself, I'm offended by it when we get to what we're talking about. But it is what it is. Okay, what is the premise for this kind of conversation when we look at where we are in 2025? Is there how would you define the purpose of this type of an executive order? Either of you guys.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the true purpose is to appeal to. I mean, it's basically back to the roots of what he's kind of his parts of his platform, and he's really trying to appeal to his base. Fundamentally disagree, with where this is going, because ultimately people identify with people of their similar whatever. And so, as a woman, I don't see why it's wrong to have a museum dedicated, or part of a museum dedicated to famous women military people or famous women authors, or it's no different than Italian Americans are proud of the fact that their heritage is Italian, or German Americans, or Polish Americans, African Americans. I don't see the harm in having portions of museums or museums dedicated to subgroups, because that's who that subgroup identifies with.
Awesome. Jonathan?
I think it's important to note it's not talking about defunding those parts of the museum. It's talking about defunding exhibits and programs that focus on certain topics. So for the Museum of Women's History, it is not talking about doing away with the museum itself. It's talking about doing away with programs that what does it say?
But there isn't an actual.
Who's going to decide that, Jonathan? And who's going to? I mean, it becomes a slippery slope a little bit. That you've got an arbiter of what is okay and what isn't okay. You know, so like at the National Cemetery, they struck lists off their websites of famous women, military people, famous Black military people, famous Latino, and to me that's just ridiculous and absurd. And you're really just trying to, again, to appeal to a lowest common denominator of a subset of your core voter.
And the thing, well, the Women's History Museum does not exist in form. However, when I look, this past August, I took a trip to DC, and I went to the National African American Museum of History and Culture. It was my first time being at that particular museum, but it was an amazing experience to be able to go and to see all of that history and culture that represents a period of 300-400 years in American history was really exciting. Just from the emergence, like post-slavery, looking at the representation of churches and the Black community was a very empowering experience for someone like me. So when we come back, I want to talk about what seems to be the real focus or the real target on these executive orders. We're going to the stick. Stay, don't go away. We'll be back with more United Shades of Gray.
You're listening to United Shades of Gray on WSGW.
This is Kareem. We're back with more United Shades of Gray, conversations of race in America. Today, we're talking about two executive orders that were written by President Trump and his administration, the impact of President Trump's executive orders. We're looking at Executive Order 14253 and the impact that it would have. So as I was saying before break, I had the opportunity to go to the African American Museum of History and Culture, and it was an amazing experience to go. I think the building was 4 floors, if I'm correct. But just looking, it was the only museum that was in the entire mall area that was not a white building. It was actually a brown building, very intricate and unique design. But going in and seeing, yes, there were exhibits. The things that I remember most are not the exhibits on slavery, even though they did exist. And seeing those pieces were very profound. Looking at the quarters and how everything was situated was really quite amazing. But it was also those things about history that you don't see, the existence or the emergence of the Black Boule, as many people might talk about it, and how its origin really came from really creating a place where Black secret codes and societies where we get these fraternal organizations, and seeing the emergence of those things. And then also how it was separated into periods in American history as it relates for Black folks was really quite interesting. The emergence of the church, the emergence of Black businesses, Black communities where excellence in business and entertainment and education came into view, and then the fight for equality and the struggles through the 60s. and the 70s. It was just really an amazing experience, and I could not imagine not having that information available to the public in a way that the public can go there and to learn. When I was in 8th grade, I had a history teacher, Mr. War, and he would always say, "Come, Mr. Baldwin." He would come in and say, "What is history?" And then we would say, "Records of the past." And he would say, "Well, what's the purpose of history?" And we were taught to say, to learn from past mistakes. And when I look at these, museums and history and culture and how it's captivated and presented in these exhibits, that is one of the most beautiful things I think that exists. So how do you feel about, Mark, this attack on museums and history because women are highlighted?
I think, yeah. I mean, as I said in the first segment, fundamentally, I don't agree with it. Generally speaking, I think this is a really slippery slope. Um, and because ultimately people identify with similar people of similar whatever heritage, women identify, if I'm a woman, I'm interested in what other famous women have done. If I'm an Italian American, I might be interested in Italian American heritage, and that's where I think it just gets really. This
Well,
is
Mark,
just a slippery slope. I think that what the administration would say is all we're trying to do is get rid of discriminatory practices where, because of your race, ethnicity, gender, gender assignment, you're getting an unfair advantage. I don't know how that applies to museums and things like that, or lists on
history,
websites.
but
So
but history is about what has occurred
I
in
understand. Like I
past,
said,
right?
I don't agree with it, and I think it's just a really dangerous precedent, and it's a really slippery slope.
Well, the reason I say that is this. The reason for these museums or these exhibits to be in existence, why they were created, was because when I think that people come to let's take this from someone. When I was there were tours that were coming in from Asian countries or the Middle Eastern countries. There were folks that were coming here from Africa, and they had these huge tour groups that were going through. There were Dutch and German folk that were coming through this, and they were coming to see at the seat of our democracy in the city where it all goes down, the history of our nation. And so because that history is not has not been kept or included in other aspects of museums, they end up in specific exhibits, or they end up in self-titled museums such as the African American Museum of History and Culture, because yes, they are American history, but they haven't always had a place in the annals and the representation of American history. And I think that more than anything, it appears as an effort to whitewash Americans' history. And because I think that when we talk about slavery, we talk about these issues all the time. I don't blame either of you for what happened, 100 years ago. But I think that it is a part of what we inherit as a nation. I have to deal and reckon with the fact that my forefathers were slaves, that my grandfather never had an education past a third grade education. My grandmother never went to school or graduated. But these are things that are endemic of folks who have been a part of slavery. So there are tentacles of history from slavery and colonization that still make its way into the world today. And so to really adequately understand how many things exist today, we have to understand the importance of those histories. And to me, it seems as though there is an effort to whitewash or to not make little white kids feel bad about a history that their forefathers had. I have to relish in the fact that when I think about Africa and when I think about slavery, that there were African kings that actually sold their captors, individuals that they captured, into slavery as a part of that process. It is a part of how we have to grapple with the realities that existed. And so I always struggle with, we cannot tamper with history.
I
I
agree.
understand why you feel that way and say that. I would say that I don't know that that's really what's going on here. I think that because it's not just Black history or Black African Americans that this is being applied to. Generally
I
speaking, it's
agree.
all women, it's Latinos, And
It's
so
everybody that's not white. It's everybody that's not a white man. I mean, if you look at what they're saying, it's every group.
Jonathan wants to jump in here. He's itching to jump in. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
I agree with you when that history is taught in a neutral and objective way.
Okay.
The National Museum of African American History and Culture has been on record saying that things like the nuclear family and individualism are products of white culture, which has been demonized in this overarching narrative. So when these institutions are pushing that narrative, even if it is subliminally with what they're saying, it bleeds into how they are presenting history. It is not objective.
Okay. I appreciate what you're saying, and I would say because of your lack of culture outside of American culture, especially as it relates to the consistency of culture in African countries and African nations. And when we look at Africa, we have to think that it is a continent, not just a country. But we look at how those organizations and those civilizations and those kingdoms existed. They were very different than what we would find in an American culture, which pushes a pervasive thought process as to being the white. It's what we call, and I'm going to use a word, it is what we call white supremacy, that a particular form based upon a group of people is the way that something should be. And it doesn't, and I say that term because that is what white supremacy is. White supremacy isn't that, we're going to come over and take over but it's the idea that the way of operation, or this way of thinking, is the best way or the only way of operation. And when you look at the way that African civilizations have existed, which were the beginning of all civilizations, there is a difference in structure and how those households and those families existed. And it doesn't mean that they are wrong. It means that they're different.
That's okay. We're in a Western culture, and to demonize the fundamentals of Western culture is, you talk about sowing distrust in establishments. That's what that is.
But I don't think that it's the demonization of Western culture. I think it is a kickback or a pushback from the fact that out of Western culture, we receive colonization. And so much of what has taken place in Black spaces in these conversations is the fact that the realities that existed before the majority culture or this dominant culture has existed is no longer expressed. And so when people make those statements as it relates to the African American Museum, I think it is a pushback, not necessarily we are trying to demonize, but it is a pushback that there is a culture that exists with a beautiful, rich history that is very different than what America desires is true. It is the same thing that I say when, I see people on TV saying that, Christianity as it relates to this, and I'm a believer. I am a believer in the Bible faith, a faith that is spoken of in the Bible. But when I see them use this as a target, so that this is how it should be in our country, it's problematic because there are other people that don't agree with me. But this pervasive movement for the changing of culture, the removal of culture, because this is, when we look at this, it's not only just the removal of those things that are celebratory as it relates to African Americans in this country, but it is also about the repositioning of things that are problematic and really quite offensive to Black culture as you consider our existence and our participation in the American process. So because that's where we're going next in this next piece of this. I don't know if you want me to read that next or if you like to say something. I do want to read this next piece because I think it's interesting. In addition to this, that same order says that the order directs the Secretary of the Interior to reinstate, and this is what I was talking about, and restore the names of monuments on federal property that have been taken down since 2020, and to ensure that all descriptions and depictions of public monuments do not inappropriately disparage Americans, past or living. I would agree with that if that was across the board. And I think that if we were to take a look back at what happened in 2020, 2020 in the rearview mirror was a time of great social outcry, social justice. I think that starting with George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd on television, America had nothing to do because we were all locked in the home because of a pandemic. And out of that came a very strong sentiment of we have to look at our country's history, and we've got to make some changes based upon the things that are existing and that we've allowed to just exist. When you have Confederate soldiers and generals that were out there and they're depicted and they're a part of this, it's fine if you want to leave those individuals. But what I'm saying is, let's tell the whole story. So let's depict these things as they truly exist in the fabric of American history. And so to remove them, okay, they're removing them. I think, hey, let's remember that statue. But with that statue comes a history that cannot be hidden from what it is that we're trying to do with this museum piece, attacking these museums for what they're representing. But I just say, hey, let's tell American history, the whole history. When you talk about the weaponization or the demonization of Western culture, Jonathan, what exactly are we talking about when we refer to the teaching of that history? What specific ideas or concepts are we talking about, or instances that it's been used as a weapon versus being used as something for us to learn from and to move forward from?
You're shifting gears here just a little bit. So
Absolutely.
Can we talk about the statues for a minute?
Go ahead.
Quick.
I didn't know if you wanted to say that because I was kind of looking at you.
We're running out of time.
Go ahead.
We got to get through the rest of this order because it's really interesting. I agree with you that let's leave those statues up. Let's tell the whole story. It prompts a conversation, even if it is from a biased point of view. And I'll say that, hey, that's kind of going back on what I said earlier. It prompts a conversation, even if it's from a biased point of view, in the other way.
Right.
I'll acknowledge that.
Well, Jonathan, I really appreciate that, and I thank you.
Now that they're torn down, I say don't put them back. Let's move. Let's keep moving. I think they should not have been torn down in the first place, but putting them back says something.
Yeah, I 100% agree with Jonathan on this.
What do you mean, Jonathan?
I think Mark, go ahead. I think we're on the same wavelength here.
No, you finish your thought. I shouldn't have interrupted you. You go ahead.
To put these back is to put them in a higher place of honor. It's not a relic of the past that has been there since the Civil War. It's not this person existed. We built a statue of them. That statue got torn down. Now we're putting that back up. That does put that person in a certain light.
Gotcha.
Or that event in a certain light. And I'm like, if we're going to tell...
To your point, I never paid a lot of it. I don't care about statues. Okay, that's a cool statue. It doesn't mean anything to me. And so, number one, I didn't understand why people... I never thought about a statue in the sense of you put in your notes, Kareem, of hey, these guys fought to secede from the country, and they wanted to continue slavery.
Right.
And putting it in that context, because I had never really thought about it, I understand why people were upset and wanted to remove them. I wouldn't have gone there. I kind of like what you're saying, Kareem, of okay, this is part of our history and kind of here's what they fought for. But I 100% agree with Jonathan. Putting them back up, given what they stood for, I think really you're making a statement about an implicit support of that.
Let's for 1 second, and I appreciate that commentary. Let's take a step back, and because I'm curious, when the government gets really involved in how culture and art is displayed, what are your thoughts about that? Because I think it's very, I think that what makes...
I've kind of talked about it. I mean, to me, it's just a really slippery slope. And at some point, there is a line, there has to be a line. But it's a really difficult thing to kind of do and to do well because everyone has a different opinion on what is right and what is pornography. My wife defines as pornography is fundamentally different than what I define as pornography. So
I think men have a bit more tolerance in terms of what might be pornography.
I think it's just start getting into things like different ethnic groups, and I think it's just a really slippery slope. And I think it's a really like I said, a dangerous precedent that we're beginning to set.
What is your thought, Jonathan?
My thought is when government starts to get involved in art in any way, it's going to have a slant. I think for years it has had a slant in a left leaning way. It has alienated people on the right because it tells this story of white culture is bad, white people are bad. It has told that story through art, through history, all over the place, especially, and has used government funds to do it. Now the pendulum has swung the other way, and those things are being removed. So now it's a problem.
Well, my question is this.
Well, it's always a problem. It's just whose problem is it, Jonathan? I mean, that's the
There you go.
reality. It's always a problem. 100% of the time, there is a certain percentage of the population where it's a problem.
And that's what you were saying. You can't make everybody happy.
But I think that this is for people who don't see themselves expressed in the institutions that exist. When your culture and your identity are not expressed in what exists, and this would kind of contribute to the left leaning. I think sometimes we go a little bit too left in certain things, but when I don't see the expression of the contributions of African Americans in American culture, when I go to Washington D.C. and I see this beautiful complex without the understanding of history and people not understanding that most of what exists in the mall that people come from around the world to see were built by the hands and the backs of slaves. That's an important piece of what takes place. Now, when you talk about that, slavery was nasty business. There's no good way to make it a beautiful thing, or even, and we don't want it to be. I think that we need to take that into account. I don't think the idea is to say you are evil because you were a part of this, because in the same token, there were so many white folks and other nationalities that were a part of. Blacks would have never experienced the freedom that we have today without the allyship of so many white Americans. And so I think that it is, if we look at it as American and we don't look at this as Black American or white American or Dixie or the Masons or whatever, then I think that we come to a place to understand that American history, art and culture, when told accurately and portraying things the way that they were, there is a hard piece that we have to swallow. It is a tough times that we have to deal with, and we have to come to a place that we can have some sense of resolve. But there are also times in those same spaces where it's very tough that we see the beauty of what we can be as a people when we come together.
And I want to put out there that there are very few other countries in the world that recognize those terrible things that their country has done or their culture has inflicted. There are very few other countries in the world that will even acknowledge those things. So I think that's something unique to America.
Oh, I think America is actually way behind. As I've traveled the country or traveled the world, when I go to places like South America and you see the representation of their activity in things like the transatlantic slave trade, it is much different than it is in the U.S. When you go to Spain and you go to see the art, and even just in the main streets of places like that, their existence and their embracing and understanding of that is very different, and they talk about it and share it, and they understand it. Go ahead. We got 59 seconds. It's yours.
I'm talking about like the state opinion
okay.
on the thing. Art and music and culture is widely dictated by the people, and that is a good thing, and those people can celebrate things. But the state opinion on a lot of things, you look at Japan with things during World War II. Germany is a lot different in that regard.
Absolutely.
You look at a lot of European countries and in kind of the ways that they were founded, they don't go into a whole lot of detail. England does pretty well with it. But that's kind of what I'm talking about, that the state opinion, America is pretty unique in the fact that we not celebrate it, but recognize it in such a prominent way.
Well, I would love for us to continue this conversation. I think that understanding reconciliation, conciliation, and embracing our past is very important as Americans. We're going to have to go. I'm going to say God bless you all. Take care of yourselves and each other. Grace and peace.